A year ago, the United States Navy was attacked in the middle of the night in a coordinated strike that killed 7 of our sailors. Period. There was no accident. There was no dereliction. There was no fatigue. This was a coordinated strike. Now, I have my theories about what happened after a year of investigation and 100 and something videos. But it's just speculation. I could back it up with some really good evidence. Given that we know the story from the Navy is pathetic and full of holes. And I know that if I have these questions as just some old Army guy in Florida, these 7 families, I'm sure, have questions. Pointed questions. Because we can rebuild ships all day long, but we can't rebuild lives. That's for sure. But you were supposed to think it was an accident. You were supposed to think that because of the quote-unquote Obama Navy, that our poorly trained, hapless sailors just floating out there in the middle of the ocean had no idea they were on a collision course with a giant freighter who slammed into them. And of course, they were all asleep too on autopilot, and thank God for the autopilot, and they took it back over and took it downrange, and then by the time the crew realized, oh no, what happened, they turned around and came back and saw the stricken freighter and then called it in. And of course, there was just innocent confusion reporting the time of 2:20 as the collision when it was really 1:30. That just so coincidentally happened on the part of both the cargo freighter and the destroyer. And then they sailed off. But the crew was heroes because they were able to keep the ship from floundering. That's the make-believe story. I'm sorry, that was supposed to be the truthful story. It's just, when I first started this investigation, I had about 3,000 subscribers, and honestly, the amount of pushback that I got for even doing the investigation was ridiculous. It really was. From a lot of Navy guys, in fact, telling me I was full of it and didn't know what I was talking about. Well, now that we've gone through the investigation and we've been able to uncover lie after lie after lie after inconsistency, that's all gone away. But the terrifying part of it is that I almost gave up on this investigation. I didn't know I was going to be the only one. I didn't realize, and it's the only reason I stuck with it. I was hoping some big, quote-unquote, truth channel would have picked up on this, and even the little bit of evidence that I had uncovered, and gone to their much larger audiences with it, but that never panned out. They were too busy with other things, I guess. Things more important than the lives of 7 sailors. You see, it all started with this guy. I'm not a Navy guy. I don't know Navy ships, but I do know people, and I do know when they're lying. And I also know who those 2 guys in the background are. Served with a lot of them. And forget the fact that in 3 separate occasions, 48 hours nearly after the collision, that this admiral, not spokesman, admiral, 3 separate times said that the collision happened at 0220 hours, when it actually had happened at 0130 hours. Forget the fact that he said that the U.S. Navy would cooperate fully, and then a week later saying, oh yeah, by fully we meant that we're going to do all the investigation and then we'll let you know what we find. You can forget all that. Because what it really boils down to is that other ship. The idea that even if it wanted to, without some major help, a cargo vessel could ram into the side of a $2 billion, basically Corvette at sea, And we've seen the videos of what this ship has the ability to do, even within a matter of a minute. And we've seen the ridiculous reports. And we've seen the ridiculous crayon drawings that the Navy thought would pass for official accounts that initially, when they first put them out, didn't even have the right times. You see, when I went through everything that was wrong with this story, it would have been an hour-long video, and you'd have gotten bored by the time we got less than halfway through. And these ridiculous times. How even once this came out in, when was this? This was before this would have been August of 2017. This is between the time of the Fitzgerald and the McCain. Even some Navy folks were like, wait a minute, this makes absolutely no sense. How could this have happened in this order? And why is this saying this and that? And then when everything happened with the McCain, then of course, there were those who tried to double down on blaming the last administration, saying it was all their fault, not looking at the facts. And that's kind of been the, I don't know, modus operandi for the last year and a half, people ignoring facts. But I kept going. And then finally, in the most recent articles, we finally got to hear from people who were aboard the ship, even though they had been prohibited from talking to anyone for the first time in the history of the Navy. Because we saw after the Cole, literally 3 days later, we had guys who were aboard talking to U.S. press. And within a matter of months after the Porter, we had guys who were aboard that ship standing in front of cameras talking to the press about what happened. But to this day, 1 year later, there are absolutely zero articles where any member of the USS Fitzgerald has spoken independently to a member of the press. All we have are sworn testimonies from Article 32 hearings. That's it. Now, you can go to USNI and you can read article after article after article about this event and this story, and they go all the way back for a year, and there's lots and lots of them. But when we did finally hear from someone, the story they gave, the account they gave, pretty much sealed the Navy's lie. Something about how somebody in the CIC watched a ship bearing down on their position, not watching their ship sail out in front of a cargo vessel, which was what the Navy was saying, moving at 25 knots toward a collision point that another cargo vessel was moving toward at 20 knots. It goes on, and I could go off on any one particular tangent. I mean, forget the idea of the cargo vessel changing its AIS reporting rate literally in the middle of this incident, never having even been operating like a SOLAS vessel would, meaning that the entire track was falsified. Personally, given that we're at the end of the video, my theory is this. And I'm sure all of the trolls will come back and shoot all the holes out of it, but this is what I think happened. In the middle of the night, the Fitzgerald was out there doing something. It wasn't just in transit. And the Chinese, having already developed smart mines, we know they exist. You can look them up. They sit on the bottom and they wait for a very specific ship. These mines can passively detect the exact acoustic signature of an exact ship. They can even differentiate destroyer from destroyer. And because of what was happening in North Korea at the time, all of the missile launches, these destroyers were platforms for missile interdiction. And so probably Chinese, North Korean, something like that. A mine hit the USS Fitzgerald right on the hull, and it crippled it. And I'm sure the captain was asleep at the time. I do believe he was in his quarters, but I don't think he was asleep. After that, there was a ship assigned to watch this event, the ACX Crystal. Watching the event and reporting the event, they realized the mine didn't do its job. The mine hit it. The mine didn't sink it, which is a testament to the survivability of our destroyers. So realizing that the ship hadn't been sunk and they were going to report that they'd been hit by a mine, they came and circled back. And they rammed it. And they still didn't sink it. That's when everything fell apart for this attack on the United States. You see, that's when they had to flip everything over and start to cook up a story. You see, I think this was meant to start a war. The timing of it. And it didn't work. Not all false flags do. Not all false flags go off without a hitch. See, there's one piece of information I haven't revealed about this cargo captain, the guy that was in charge of the vessel, the cargo ship that rammed into the Fitzgerald, caused the above the waterline damage, but not below the waterline. That was a mine. You see, Mr. Advincula is an actor. A lot of people don't know that. That Ronald Advincula, the captain of the ACX Crystal, is an actor. And he had his role to play, and he played it. Now, I'm sure there's lots of holes in my story like there are anyone else's. But there's no reason this guy's story should have differed from the Navy's at all, but it did. It did in ways that made absolutely no sense. Because the Navy was giving the guy a pass, and he was contradicting the Navy. Why would you do that? Because everything got messed up. The ship was supposed to have been sunk. There wasn't supposed to have been a crew to interview. There wasn't supposed to have been any recovery of bodies. At least not at the shore. There wasn't supposed to have been anyone left alive. The ship was supposed to have been lost at sea and probably recovered by maybe some Japanese Coast Guard, Japanese Maritime Self-Defense. But of course, all being in shock, all being suffering from post-traumatic stress. This is what was supposed to happen. This actor aboard the ACX Crystal was supposed to have told this story. But none of it made sense because it all fell apart. And the Navy is in damage control. Full-blown, let's just pull out our box of 64 crayons and cook up a story that maybe we can use the news cycle to distract, and maybe it'll make you look at just good enough that nobody will ask questions. Except for people on YouTube, of course, and simply because they're on YouTube, we can use that to discredit them. You see, I initially thought this guy was in on it, and the more I look at it, I don't think he was. I think he was a patsy. I think he was the sacrificial lamb that got put out there, and those two cats in the background knew it at the time that their game had been blown. See, we were supposed to be at war right now with Korea or China or who the hell ever. But ironically, they underestimated our sailors. And they underestimated our ships. And the loss of these 7 guys, I'm sure 30, 40, 50 years from now, when no one cares, the real story is going to get told. And these guys will be seen as the heroes they are. Now, of course, they're seen as just victims of poor training and victims of fatigue and all this other crap. Well, not here. Never shall that be the case. These guys are heroes, and they always will be. And I'll leave it there. Pray for the families. Pray for those of the McCain. We're going to do a video for them too in August. Like, share, subscribe.